We created an environment where people wanted to come and join us. They were fascinated by what we were doing.
And I looked in the mirror and I said to myself, and this was the wake-up call, how did it get this bad? How did this happen? Am I still loving what I'm doing? Or am I just having a bad day and maybe it'll come back tomorrow? Or maybe it's gone and maybe this change has changed me.
Hi, my name is Karen Gilhooly, and I'm the host of Make Minutes Matter. Today, I'm with one of my best friends and former work associates, John Paguaga. John and I are going to have a nice conversation today about the many things that have happened in his life that might actually benefit some of the people out in our audience who are experiencing change in their careers and in their lives. So John, welcome.
Thanks, Karen. Great to be here.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay.
So we've known each other for a long time, John, and we've been together through so much. I'd like to, just for the audience, I'd like them to hear a little bit about how we met from your view, and I'll be able to correct you, of course, as we go through it. Just very quick.
Well, I remember when you first started, we heard this person had come into the organization. You may remember we were actually in Jersey City at training. And you were at training rather, and I was up on the floor where we were located, and I came down at your break to introduce myself.
Yes, you did.
And interesting enough, my motives were interesting because at that time you were brought in by the new executive, and I just thought it was probably in my best interest to get to know you.
Smart.
But I never in a million years would have thought that it would have evolved into this great friendship and relationship and work relationship that we've had. And I've told you this once, and I'll tell you again, you changed my life. So, and who would have thought?
Yeah, well, thank you. And you've changed my life too, John. And you know what's interesting is that from the very first moment that I met you, our conversation was different than most others that I was having at that point in my life. What we talked about was purpose, about being in it, loving what you do, really getting a kick out of getting up in the morning and going to work. We talked an awful lot about that. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what was interesting is that when I first met you, you were that guy. You were that guy. You were in love with your job. You were in love with your team. Your team loved you. The customers loved you. It was just a wonderful, wonderful thing. But then life took a change. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that because I think this is something that our audience is experiencing as well. You can be in the best job with the best company in the best possible situation of all. And then something changes. And then it's all up for grabs from that point. So not to make you uncomfortable or to bring up, challenging memories, but I think there's a lot in the journey that you went through in this very special period of your life where you made some different choices than you thought you'd ever would. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, so change is interesting. Sometimes it sneaks up on you, and sometimes it just kind of knocks you in the head. I think it was a combination of both. I think change was sneaking up. As you'll recall, at that time, the organization started making some changes at a very senior level within our group. And little by little, when that happens, as we know, people tend to come into the organization who are affiliated with people from another organization. Yep. And with that comes a change in style and culture, in the way they like to run the business. And I think at the same time, the workplace was changing a little.
That's true.
We had many, many years where, as a manager of people, you were recognized and rewarded for having your people's back and looking out for them. And not that that was going away, but it became very important, at least in the management team that came in, that we were not only doing that, but we were probably should be spending more time managing up in the organization as well as managing across. Mm-hmm. And although that was always my style, the emphasis had changed. And to be quite honest, I like the other way. I like spending more of my time with my people, managing them and being empathetic to their situations and being supportive and being a trusted person to them. And at that time also, Karen, we had some stuff going. I had a team of over 15 people, and one of my team members was suffering from cancer, and another team member tragically lost her husband.
Yes.
And that was very, very difficult times. And it didn't make it easy to kind of step back from doing that to now manage across and manage down. So manage up rather. So that was an interesting time that led to, for the first time in my career, that I did not receive a rating that was above average. And in fact, it was worse than not being above average. It was below average.
Yes.
And that was something I never experienced before. If I could look back now, I think I probably had more of a hand in it than I thought, because when change comes, you have two choices. You can embrace the change or you can resist the change.
That's right.
I could be pretty stubborn. After all, I am a Taurus. So, and I was resisting the change that was going on, and that was probably not in my best interest. And again, it led to this subpar review. But it also led to what we often refer to as a wake-up call. When you truly wake up. And interesting enough, I'll share a story with you. It was back in October of 2013, and we were away at one of these national conferences where you see lots of clients and you have an exhibit booth where you do booth duty and you're on the whole time.
Yes. Yes.
This conference coincided with my poor annual mid-year review. So a lot was on my mind. At that time, both my daughters were in college, and I had seen one of my teammates doing my job in another region be moved out. So clearly I was getting very anxious and concerned about my job. And it's very interesting when it happens. Stress, you respond to stress in different ways. Not only do you feel stressful, sometimes your body manifests the stress. So I was getting ready to leave for the airport, and I was looking in the mirror. I said, oh my God, it looks like I have a sty in my eye. And here I was going to be in front of these people, and nothing's worse than having a sty in the eye. But it got worse as I kept looking, because then I realized I had styes in both eyes, just the beginnings of it. So I get on the plane and I get there, and the styes just don't get any better.
Yes.
And I started wearing my glasses, which I only needed for distance, but I was wearing them all the time, hoping that it would hide the styes. But it was very difficult time for me. But the real wake-up call, and this is no pun intended, the conference was in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And Las Vegas being 3 hours behind New York, or New York being 3 hours ahead. So it was after the first day, and now my eyes are on fire. And I'm looking in the mirror, and I look like Rocky Raccoon, and it isn't a good look. So I can only imagine what people were thinking when they're looking at me.
I was at that conference, John. I remember.
And so I call my wife at 4 a.m. from my hotel in Las Vegas. And I said, Jax, I said, what am I going to do? I said, I look like a raccoon. What can I do? So she Googles it on the internet. She says, all right, it's telling you should take some warm compresses and put them on your eyes, on and off your eyes. So I hung up with her, and I do that for about an hour at 4 o'clock in the morning, getting ready for the next day. And I looked in the mirror and I said to myself, and this was the wake-up call, because I was indeed waking up for the day, how did it get this bad? Yeah. How did this happen? How did I spend, at that time, probably the first better part of 30 years being on the top of my game, being a top performer? And now, look at me. It was clearly my wake-up call that I guess I could no longer ignore what was happening. Change was happening, and I wasn't responding and reacting to the change, nor did I want to. That was probably the most important part. That new manager that they wanted wasn't going to be me. I wasn't going to leave my team behind. I wasn't going to pay less attention to them. So yeah, that was the moment of my great wake-up call.
Yeah. And what a great wake-up call it was, because it opened your mind to some possibilities. So the other wonderful thing that was going on, as you'll recall, is that we were doing a huge transformation over in the area that I had been assigned. And there was one thing that I really needed, and that was to get my people lined up behind me. And I knew that this wasn't going to happen by myself. I needed help. I needed supporters. I needed folks that believed in the mission. And so as I watched this whole spiral that was taking place with you, it occurred to me, based on the early conversations that you and I had, that this actually might be the best of all opportunities. And I remember having this conversation with you, John, and it didn't take very long. And the first 5-10 minutes were hanging on to what you had, and then the other 50-60 minutes were focused on where we were going. And I asked you to come and help me. I asked you to come and help me create this wonderful organization that we both believe in, where people would love what they do. So let's talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, I'll never forget this, because you were excited to tell me about that, but you were a little apprehensive on sharing it because it wasn't going to be a lateral move.
No, it wasn't.
It was actually going to be a grade level below where I was. So I was going to have to give up being a director of an organization, which you work hard to get.
Yes.
And I remember you approached it very cautiously, and my reaction probably surprised you. I said, Karen, I don't care what you call me. Is my salary going to be reduced? And you said, no, it's still within the band. I said, I don't care what you call me. What you've just described fits my strengths and is fully aligned with what's important to me, which is making an impact and a difference in people's lives and in the organization. And what you've outlined for me is going to do that. So I'm all in.
Yes, you were all in and still are all in. I mean, one of the great things about you, Joan, is that knowing you at that low point and seeing where you're at right now, you know what it's like to be down there, and you know that that's not a place that anybody wants to exist. And yet you had the courage to step up and try something different. And that was really, really, it was beautiful and remarkable. So let's take it forward a little bit. So you and I have been working together now for many years, changing the world, changing the way that people think about their jobs, think about how they show up to work and all of that. And throughout the course, you've had a chance to work with many people that were clearly in the wrong job, that needed to go find a new one, people who might have been in the right job who just didn't have the right mindset for it, and then people who were aspiring to move into our organization. And do you remember what you felt our theme should be about creating this environment where everybody wanted to play ball with us? Do you remember this?
Everybody wanted to be like us.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. We were the cool kids. We were indeed the cool kids.
And the least cool kid part of the organization. The least cool kid part of the organization. We created an environment where people wanted to come and join us. They were fascinated by what we were doing.
They were truly fascinating. I'll recall getting so many phone calls because nobody actually wanted to put it in writing. They said, it's very exciting what you guys are doing. Is there a place in your organization for me? And the number of calls and conversations I had with people, because what we were doing at the time was quite innovative. And it shouldn't have been, but it's the way you've always managed, Karen. You were putting together an organization where your directs all complemented each other. I could only make that dreaded sports analogy to a coach that wanted to put together a team that would win a championship. And you didn't bring in a whole bunch of people that did the same thing. You brought in people that complemented each other.
Yes.
So your management team had all the pieces to it, and it positioned us to be able to do those things that we did. And boy, did we do a lot.
We did. I remember a lot of the things that we did to help people feel comfortable and feel valued in the workplace. And through those exercises, I always felt that you were right by my side, and that we're attached at the hip. And when people would want to talk to me about where they were going in their career, what they were doing, how they plugged in, all of that, they felt equally comfortable talking with you. And that was such a great thing for me. And you bring up the team. We did have a beautiful team, a dream team. And we've done that a couple times in this run that you and I have had together. But in this particular iteration, not everybody was necessarily all that geared for wanting to be this new model of what does it mean to be a manager? What does it mean to be a leader? I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think you bring up something really, really important, because anytime change comes in the organization, people have a decision to make.
That's
Is
right.
this something that I can see myself doing, or not? And what was really interesting about it, those that didn't believe they were going to fit or this was for them, I'll always remember, we worked very, very hard to find a place for them. It wasn't, well, it's this way or the highway, there's the door, don't let it hit you on the way out. No, we work with them. And this was the beauty of it. I think I went through most of my career not giving a lot of thought to self-awareness, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And what I came to learn over the last 10 years of my career that I didn't really give a lot of thought to in the first 30 is that it is really all about self-awareness. Self-awareness is everything.
Yeah.
Because if you're not aware of your strengths, of your weaknesses, of your core values, what's important to you, you could spend your career like a ship just drifting out at sea and never getting anywhere.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate for a lot of those 30 years that through little luck and maybe some intuition, I was able to really enjoy most of those
Yeah.
30 years until that change came about. But it was as a result of that personal wake-up call that I realized the importance of why I was now unhappy in the role I was in and why what you were proposing to me made so much sense. And that's the approach we took with everybody. If you remember, the one thing you asked me when we first started was, I sat down and met with every single person in our new organization, and I had the conversation with them. Tell me about what you consider your strengths to be. Tell me what's important to you. It's really interesting. In my retirement now, if I can say that in quotes, been spending some time binge watching.
Yeah.
And I went back to an oldie but a goodie, West Wing.
Ah,
And there's a great little story that's told by the chief of staff, Leo McGarry, and one of the members of the White House was struggling with something. And he tells this quick little story. He says, there's this guy walking down the street and he falls into a hole. And he looks up and the walls of the hole are quite high. So a doctor comes walking by and he yells up, he says, hey, can you help me? So what does the doctor do? The doctor writes him a prescription and throws it down the hole. Along comes a priest. The guy in the hole yells up, hey, Father, can you help me? The priest stops, writes a prayer down, and throws it down the hole. Then his friend comes walking by, and the guy in the hole yells up, hey, Joe, can you help me? So what do you think Joe does? Joe jumps into the hole. And the guy says, what are you doing? What are you, crazy? Now you're down here with me. He said, yeah, but I've been here before and I know the way out. And when I heard that only just a week ago, it really resonated with me and said, isn't that what it's all about? When you can take your personal experience. And my experience was so fresh when I sat down with all those that I could say, yeah,
I've been there.
I've been down that hole, but I know the way out. And the way out was stuff that you and I had talked about, and then embracing everything around me, reading different books that were inspiring me, and really coming to an understanding of how we get that kind of fulfillment. And it is really all about aligning your strengths and your core values.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can be doing a job that you're really, really good at, but if you don't feel like it's aligned with what's important to you in your life at that moment, every day it's going to eat away at you a little at a time, even if you're very good at what you do.
That's true.
So I have found the alignment to a core value takes on almost a greater role than maybe being 100% fully aligned with your strengths, because it's so, so important. And for me, what I realized for most of, not my whole career, and certainly towards the end of my career, was I needed to be aligned with my core values. My core values, again, were making a difference and then making an impact in people's lives. And if I was doing that, it didn't feel like work at all.
Yeah. I remember in those early days that we're having lots of management transition taking place, and we were so busy. One of the joyous expressions of being busy was working on the weekends, as you'll recall, which we did because we were having fun.
We did it joyfully.
We were having fun.
Brian and Jackie might not have thought it was as much fun.
They didn't think it was as much fun as we did, but nonetheless, I remember having a conversation with one of these newly arrived executives who saw you in the office on a Saturday. And I was in his office the following week, and he said, "Who is this guy that is walking around this office? It's like he's floating. He's like 10 inches off the ground. Who is that?" I said, "Oh, that must be John." Who is he? I said, "He's my chief people guy." He goes, "You have a people guy?" I said, "Yeah, I do. I've got it probably called something else, but that's what he does. He's the heart and soul of my team, and he helps me connect this whole idea of values, purpose, skill, all of that together into one big ball so that people feel good about what they're doing."
Yeah, when you said floating on air, that reminded me of the very, very first conversation we had about the buckets.
Ah, yes.
And how important it was that I had the bucket conversation with all our new employees so they understood about the 3 buckets. And bucket 1 is when you're floating on air.
That's right.
When you're all in.
Yes.
When you're so excited because you are fully aligned with what you're doing to your strengths and also your core values.
For our audience, let's explain what the buckets are, John. You do such an excellent job of this.
So as I recall from that very first conversation, I might have taken a little poetic license over the years and tweaked it a little when I told the story. But as you had laid it out for me, there are 3 buckets. Bucket 1 is when you're all in, 100%. You love what you do and you look forward to doing it every day. Before we go to bucket 2, we'll talk about bucket 3. Bucket 3 is the polar opposite. You've lost that loving feeling.
Yes.
The work you're doing no longer excites you. In fact, it doesn't motivate you at all.
You don't want to get up in the morning.
You don't want to get up in the morning, right?
Yes,
You don't
terrible.
like what you're doing. And no matter how good at you are of posing and pretending, you can't change the fact that you're not in a good place.
Yeah.
Which brings us to bucket 2, which is always quite interesting because I'd have this conversation with people and say, "So what's bucket 2? What do you think bucket 2 means?" And you know what they'd say? "It's in the middle." I said, "Well, that's helping us out a lot."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay, let's elaborate on
Yes.
It's the middle." And with bucket 2, as I like to describe it, bucket 2 is where you go when things are starting to look and feel different. They're starting to change. And you're thinking about it and you're asking yourself the question, am I still loving what I'm doing? Or am I just having a bad day and maybe it'll come back tomorrow? Or maybe it's gone and maybe this change has changed me. And I always thought it very interesting when you told the bucket story. When you ask somebody what bucket they're in,
Yes.
people tend to say
Bucket 1.
No, they say bucket 1, but if you press them on that, they'll sometimes say, "Well, I'm in bucket 2. But you always put that nice little feature in about the 3 buckets. You said, "Well, you can go into bucket 2 during the day."
Yes.
And have this conflict of where you are in this discussion with yourself. But at the end of the day, you can only put yourself into bucket 1 or bucket 3. Because if you put yourself in bucket 2, you might stay in bucket 2 for 10 years, sitting on the fence and
In
not
limbo.
making the decision, the hard decision that you need to make.
That's right.
So I always found that incredibly helpful and useful, and I've passed it on countless times to people that I had the opportunity to coach. And I said, it's a good thing to do. Can you do it every day? Yeah, maybe that's a little overkill, but you shouldn't do it once a year either. Maybe you should do it a couple of times a week. Check in with yourself. What bucket am I in today? I'm in bucket 1. I had a great day. Well, what were you doing that made it such a great day? What was it about that day? The devil's in the detail, right?
That's right.
The details of the devil. The devil's in it's there. Why? Ask yourself. Note. Because that is when we started. You know, the interesting thing about data and you know, that great movie, I know you're a big fan of the movie Moneyball.
I am.
And how Moneyball changed baseball. Because now we were introducing, analyzing statistics and data, correct?
That's right.
And I don't think we do enough of that about ourselves.
No, we don't.
We like to review and analyze everything else.
With a color, with a palette that kind of fogs the reality of it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's face it, change is a heck of a lot easier to talk about than it is to actually experience. And I think that people are genuinely afraid of change. I mean, if they're honest with themselves, there's no one that wants to leap into something that you don't know. I mean, even the most intolerable situation is more comfortable than the great unknown.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting concept. But this bucket thing, you know, it's, as we talked from the early days, I mean, this has really been a way to organize a conversation with someone about this goal of being in that place where you love what you're doing.
But you know what I always found interesting, Karen? People don't spend a lot of time. Again, self-awareness is probably the one quality people have just missed for a very long.
Yeah.
Guilty as charged for so often, so many years. But the interesting thing is to ask yourself, when you ask somebody, well, what is it that you're good at? What are your strengths? They have to pause for a moment, because it's like it's a tough question for them to answer. And it is, because they haven't really given a lot of thought to it. And I always found when I read about it in the book Now Discover Your Strengths by Marcus Buckingham,
Yes.
he gives a definition of strength being a consistent high level of performance in a given activity.
Yes.
Think about that for a minute. You're consistently performing at a high level in a specific activity. And that's probably a great way to look at a definition of a strength.
Yes.
Well, let's take a look at that. And the interesting thing is, as we said, people will review and analyze everything else but themselves.
That's
it's a
right.
very hard thing to do, to look in that mirror and challenge yourself. It reminds me of that great quote from the movie that I always loved, you know, about women's baseball during World War II. A League of Their Own.
Yeah.
A League of Your Own. I probably got that wrong. But it's a great conversation that takes place between the best player in the league, who's going through change in a relationship with a sister who is also in the league. And the manager is Tom Hanks. He plays Jimmy Dugan. And I remember the conversation. She was going to leave and go back to Oregon because her husband had gotten injured in the war. And she said to Jimmy Dugan, the manager, it just got too hard. And he delivered a great line that I've used countless times. He says, it's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it.
That's true.
The hard is what makes it great.
Yes.
And if we apply that to us taking a deeper look in ourselves, yeah, it is supposed to be hard, because guess what? A lot of people don't do it.
That's right.
But those that do it, the hard, going through that process is what's going to make it great for them. And I look at myself, and having come to the realization of what my strengths truly are and what's important to me. And when I found and I discovered those things, and going through that very hard process that I went through, it truly, truly did turn out great for me.
Yeah.
And I can't tell enough people about that, in hopes that they will invest in themselves and go through that hard, because at the end it could be great.
Yeah, it is an interesting idea that people should want to lean into hard. I think that's a piece that's kind of missing from today's vernacular, in this, you know, instantaneous environment that we live in, where you want something, you snap your fingers or press a button or swipe, and then all of a sudden it's there. Life isn't that way. It's just not. And you know, for all the people that I've worked with, some of whom very close to me, in talking about the fact that all things happen with purpose, even when it's hard, that there's something in that learning that you're able to take from it, that you can apply in the next iteration, whatever that's going to be, that has to be more on the conversation, I think, for today, especially with our younger people. You do a lot of work with young people, John, and many through my requests and sending people to you for your guidance. But you've got a little bit of a program that you've established by now, and I'd like you to share some of your knowledge with our viewers, because whether you're new and just entering the workplace or you've been in your job for 30, 35 years, you really need to go through this process. So maybe you could share that.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I always love when you send people my way. I just, because again, it just feeds what's so important to me is to have an opportunity to make a little impact or a difference in somebody's life. Especially the people you sent to me were people that came to you because they were struggling. And again, having been down that hole and being able to figure the way out, you naturally want to share. So yeah, I did put together a little bit of a program, and I always stress to them when we start, it's so important to start at the very beginning because it's a very good place to start, to quote that.
Now don't break into song, John.
No, I can't. You don't want to hear me sing. But it is very, very important. And one of the techniques when we sit down and we chat and we take them through this whole idea of these strengths, and how self-awareness, first and foremost, the concept of self-awareness is so very, very important. But then self-awareness of your strengths and try to understand what your strengths are. And strengths really being made up of talent, knowledge, and skill. When combined, that really will give you that consistent high level of performance in a specific activity. But the question often becomes, well, how do I begin to understand what my strengths are?
Sure.
Before we do that, just a quick word about weakness, because it is very, very interesting. Most of in our careers, we've always been counseled by people. Oh, work on your strengths. You've got to turn work on your weaknesses rather. You've got to turn your weaknesses into strength. And Marcus Buckingham said it best. He says that is well-intentioned but misguided advice. Because if it's truly a weakness, all the training and time in the world is never going to turn it into a strength. And if it does, news alert, it wasn't a weakness to begin with. It was a strength that you had that you never tapped into.
That's right.
So we shouldn't ignore our weaknesses. We should make sure we get them up to a level that's acceptable where it doesn't pull down on our strengths. But we should spend the majority of our time getting stronger at the things that we already do well. Talent, our knowledge, and our skills combined. Great quote that's out there. It talks about let your strengths blind people to your weaknesses. It's very powerful when you think. Let your strengths be so bright that they will blind people to actually see what your weaknesses are. We all have them. So one of the exercises, very simple exercise that we give them is, do start at the very beginning. Go back in your life and think about times in your life where you actually have done things you've enjoyed and you've accomplished at the same time. Think about what those things are from all aspects of your life, from the very beginning till today, and take note of them. List them down, and then go through your list and say, all right, let me focus on the top 3 or the top 5. But let me dig a little deeper. Let me kind of write a little story. Or if you're not a writer, tell a story to somebody and discuss what it was that you did and why you feel that this was something you enjoyed doing and that you accomplished. And drill down on it and come to the realization, this is going to be a very good indication of what your strengths are. Why take a test with 300 questions and answer 7 of them 10 different times in this test to find out what you're good at? All the evidence is within you. You just have to, again, invest in yourself to do that. And all those sessions, Karen, I'd always finish off with this quote from Queen, which is, I know, a band that we both love. And it's from that song, Radio Gaga. But I kind of took poetic license, I hope Queen doesn't mind, to say, you have the time, you have the power, you've yet to have your finest hour. And that's the way I'd end all those sessions, to give them hope. That, they do have the time, no matter how old they are, and they do have the power. The power is to invest in themselves. And if they do, they're going to have their finest hour.
That's wonderful. Well, John, we could talk forever. And you are such a dear friend. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. I hope you'll come and join us again. You've got lots of insights to share. So if anyone wants to talk to you, John, I know that you're in your new career. Maybe just a quick plug on what you're doing. Let the audience know.
So when I did retire, in soft quotes, air quotes there, I needed to find something to do because my wife, Jackie's a school teacher and she wasn't ready to retire yet. My daughters are grown and working outside the house. So I needed to find something to do because I didn't want to be like Kevin from Home Alone.
Yeah.
So I Googled fun things to do for early retirees that are outgoing, and it's just opened up a great second act, as it's often called. I do background acting, and I do New York City walking tours. And every day is a great day. And I truly love what I'm doing.
You are such a funny guy. You are such a wonderful man, a dear man. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, John, how would they do it?
Sure, they can send me an email at JOHN and my last name Paguaga, PAGUAGA @gmail.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being with us. Lovely.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Karen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Make Minutes Matter. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or click the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And let me know what you thought of today's conversation by following us on Instagram at Karen Gilhooly 1. That's Karen, Karen, Gilhooly, GILHOOLY, and the number 1. Let's make every moment in your career truly matter. Have a great day.